Collaborative writing. This is a writing technique.
Divide your class into pairs or triads. These groups of students will write a formal paper together. Each student contributes at each stage of the writing process. This includes brainstorming, gathering and organizing, drafting, revising, and editing. Writing groups will brainstorm, conduct preliminary research, organize ideas, and create an outline. Then divide that outline and individually write initial drafts for their sections. Then they'll review their first drafts, aligning their voice, content, and style. Next, our writing groups will combine their individual sections into a single document. Then, they will revise and edit their work, checking for content and clarity, as well as grammar, spelling, and punctuation. And after completing their final edits, they'll submit their work. Let's take a closer look at collaborative writing for blended and online delivery. Welcome to my digital playground Sakai site. I'm going to use this site today to demonstrate how I might implement a collaborative writing activity for a blended or online course. I'm using the lessons tool in Sakai to provide information and structure to my students. And you can see that I've run it over the course of 6 weeks. If you looked in the left-hand menu bar, I've got 6 weeks set up here. You could run it in less than that, or you could choose to run it in more weeks than that. This is simply the structure I've chosen for my demonstration. You can see that I begin here in week 1 by introducing the collaborative writing assignment, including the assignment parameters and a preamble to set the context and expectations for this writing assignment. Following that introduction to the assignment, I will communicate the collaborative writing pairs and triads. You can see here that I've assigned my group pairs and triads. However, this wouldn't be too difficult for you to set up in an online or blended format if you wanted your students to sign up for their own pairs or groups. Following the communication of these pairs and triads, I can scroll down. You can see that I give my task for week 1 for the collaborative writing assignment, and that's brainstorming and mind mapping. I ask my groups to conduct initial research and generate ideas through collaborative brainstorming, and to use one of the mind mapping tools I suggest here in this list to document their initial brainstorming activities. Then I give them instructions to have one member of their group submit a link or image of that group's mind map in the collaborative writing discussion forums. I then give them instructions to review their peers' contributions, offering suggestions for filling gaps or opportunities to extend, letting them know that next week they'll be using the information they gleaned from this activity to begin outlining their paper and assigning sections to work on individually. I also note here the format of the discussion forums that I've set up, and I'm going to bring you there to show you what I'm communicating here in that text now. You can see if I go to the discussion forums, I have set up collaborative writing discussions, 2 different forums. One's for the odd number groups and one for the even number groups. This is to provide my students with a little bit of support in their writing process from outside their own initial groups, but not necessarily a large group that would encompass the entire classroom. I'm trying to keep the groups small enough that students can kind of get to know what each other are doing and develop a rapport in terms of their collaboration in both the online and blended environment. So you can see if I click on the groups 1, 3, 5 collaborative writing discussion forum, I have a first post here that shares the initial brainstorming and mind map. If I click on that, you can see that I've kind of done a mock post as if I was a student or student group, sharing the mind map for the brainstorming that we've done on the topic we're proposing for our paper. I've also included a link to the mind map online right here in case somebody wanted to look at it in greater detail. I'll close that now. And that would wrap up the week 1 activity. Again, just sharing their initial brainstorming via the mind map I'm asking them to create and share in the discussion forums, then to go back and review their peers' contributions, sharing opportunities for extension or how else they might expand on or explore the topic they are proposing. Here we are in week 2 of the collaborative writing task I've assigned for my students. This week, I'm asking them to create an outline and begin initial drafts. As part of this process, the first thing I'm asking them to do is to create a Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive folder to house their group's documentation. I then ask them to submit a link of their group to their group shared development folder in the collaborative student work folder in the resources section of Sakai. I've also provided a hyperlink to the Getting Started with Google Drive Help Center website. That way my students can get any assistance they need setting up and sharing that shared Google Drive folder. I've also asked them to each create their own unique document housed in the shared development folder to begin writing the draft for their assigned section of their group's paper. Finally, I would provide instructions on getting started with the writing process for that week, focused on the outline and the individual writing they will be doing this week. Let's take a look at the resources section where I've asked them to make contributions to the collaborative student work folder. You can see that if I expand that folder, I've already set up folders for each one of the writing pairs or triads. If I click on the information button for each group, you can see the names for each of the groups, the names of the students in each of the groups, so that we can tell which folder belongs to which students. You can see that if I expand the group 1 folder, within it, you can find hyperlinks to a shared Google Drive folder, as well as a shared Microsoft OneDrive folder, and finally the shared mind map. Let's take a look at what the Google Drive writing folder might look like. So in the shared Google Drive folder, you can see that there's a document set up for each one of my students, as well as an outline document for the entire paper. If I look at one of my individual students' documents, you can see that I can review their work. I can scroll through it and review it. When I'm ready to make any kind of comments or suggestions, I will highlight a selection of text. It could be a single word up to an entire paragraph. Once I've done so, you can see on the right-hand side here, there's an Add a Comment button. When I select that, it allows me to add comments to this documentation. Furthermore, if I wanted to refine my ability to make suggestions, I can click on this editing tab up in the top. I can edit the document directly, or I could select this suggestions option, which in effect turns your edits into suggestions, very similar to the track changes feature you'd find in the Microsoft Word application. And that's how I could essentially share feedback and edits with my students in their collaborative documentation using Google Drive. Let's take a look at how this would look if your students were using Microsoft OneDrive. I select on the link to their shared folder. You see in this folder, I've only put one document in, that's Dorothy's document. And when I select that document, it opens up for review. If I want to make any changes or comments, I need to actually select this Edit Document button up in the top right. I can choose to edit it in Word, which would download this document and open it up in the Word application on my computer. This would allow me to access track changes functionality. Or I could choose to edit it in the browser. Now, when I edit it in the browser, one of the advantages is that this document is syncing real time to the stored document in the shared folder. If I click on the Review option in the menu tab, you can see that I can add comments to the document. Very similar to the Google Drive functionality. The one thing that I can't do is make track changes edits. So I cannot track the changes that I'm making here unless I download this document to my computer and use Microsoft Word application on my computer rather than the web version. So that in a nutshell is the difference between using Google Drive and Microsoft OneDrive for sharing student work. And that encapsulates the week 2 activities for the collaborative writing assignment. Here we are in week 3 of the collaborative writing assignment. In week 3, I'm asking my students to continue working on their initial drafts. I'll also provide a reminder that they should be doing their work in a shared Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive folder. and that a link to this group's development folder should be shared in the collaborative student work folder in the resources section of Sakai. It's important that your students share this work with you so that as the instructor, you can review your students' work and you can offer suggestions and comments during the writing process. You might also provide some additional guided instruction this week for the writing process as it continues. When I go to week 4, you can see that here I've asked the groups to review their current drafts, and I would provide some additional guided instruction here about the review process I'd like them to complete while they're looking at these initial drafts. Once they've done that, I'm asking them to consolidate their group's work. Completing the review activities, they will take those initial drafts and consolidate them into a new single document. And that will be the new working document that they will be working on for the duration of this project. Here we are in week 5, and you can see here I've put optional peer review opportunity. That's right, because realistically, peer review could be a 6-week activity unto itself. So it really does depend. You could not have any peer review at all outside of within the group, peer reviewing each other's contribution and their paper. Or you could alternatively, because groups have access to each other's work via these shared development folders, you could actually set up so groups are looking at other groups' work and making contributions in terms of suggestions and offerings for editing, in addition to your own as part of this activity. So the extent to which you would implement this peer review activity would completely depend on the learning outcomes that you're pursuing for this activity. That's why I highlight the fact that it's optional. After completing this optional peer review activity or not, your students will continue working on final edits, revising and editing the work, checking for content, clarity, grammar, spelling, punctuation, and letting them know that next week they'll be submitting their final paper. And you can see that when I select the week 6 activity, final submissions, finalize your paper, submit the collaborative writing assignment in the assignment section on Sakai. And that is how I would run a collaborative writing task activity for my students in a blended or online environment over the course of 6 weeks. That is how I would set up a collaborative writing activity for a blended or online class. Well, with a couple exceptions, I think that I might, throughout those 6 weeks, implement a few more opportunities to work collaboratively. Whether that was a somewhat informal discussion happening in chat rooms or on the forums throughout the writing process, or maybe I would have more in-depth peer editing opportunities throughout that entire process, which might extend the overall length of the collaborative writing activity that I'm implementing. Either way, I think that there are a lot of opportunities to modify that activity so that it would be more collaborative or for other learning outcomes. So if you'd like to share how you might tweak or change that collaborative learning activity for online or blended development, or even in the classroom, I'd really like to have that discussion with you. Thanks for watching.